All right, guys, we've got a really special episode of In the Slot. We're doing a spin-off, joined by Joe this week. Obviously, Connor, Chris, and Henry joining me as usual. I think this, for me, is the most exciting time of the year in the NFL calendar. You've got the playoffs going on, and, we get to see who really is the best team, and there's always an upset to watch out for, but suddenly the draft just comes that bit closer. We start to piece together what that looks like, all the changes in the coaching staff, as the sofa sitting watchers that we are of this game, we actually get to feel like we could make a decision that could impact on a franchise if one day we were a complete billionaire and owned one, or a general manager. Connor, you raised your hand. Obviously, you must be in that position already. Which team is it you're changing up?
No, I think as like most people will know, like who do listen, this is our first year doing a podcast, and I think exactly what you said, like all of the things we've been talking about this season, we've mentioned the coaches, we've spoken about like Anthony Lynn and like his position, and we're seeing it happen. Like, and I think that's one of the most exciting things this year for us doing this podcast for sure is we've actually opened up a dialogue between ourselves that isn't our group chat, that isn't our fantasy league, that isn't our draft. That's how can we like put our thoughts and what's happening during the season, and we're seeing it come to life. And I agree with you. It is one of the most exciting times of the season for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And, we get to engage in conversations and think about things which potentially we didn't necessarily converse with, like you're saying, we actually get to see those ideas come about. And, interesting point about Anthony Lynn. We talked about him. The first point of discussion is the coaching carousel. And we're joined by Joe, who is a Jags fan. I think there's no better place to start than what's happening with the Jags right now, what that head coach position looks like. Don't worry about the GM, but Joe, who do you want to see them sign, and who do you think they will?
Firstly, I'm sorry that we're having to talk about the Jags when the playoffs are about to start, but yeah, I don't know. It's really open for the Jags. There's so many different options, none of which there's not too many sort of like standout names, to be honest. At the moment, there's a few names from college football, some of which I don't really know much about. We seem to have interviewed like 3 different people already, which is pretty quick work considering we only fired Doug Marone like 3 days ago or something. But yeah, like Bieniemy, Salah, and Arthur Smith, I think are 3 guys that we've already approached for interview for the head coach job. And they've all kind of got their pros and cons. I think Bieniemy's like it seems to be the guy who's getting the most excitement for Jags fans in general. And I can kind of see why, but at the same time, I don't trust the Jags to get it right. Yeah, I don't know. The other thing about Bieniemy is, I guess, it's hard to know how much of his, how in that Kansas City system, how much of it is just Andy Reid being Andy Reid, and how much of a stamp does Bieniemy actually have on that team. That said, I suppose he's been there for quite a long time, so Reid clearly trusts him. So from that point of view, I guess, there's got to be something going for him.
Yeah, it segues so nicely because it's this osmosis effect that, the NFL seems to believe in. We've seen all these Patriots coordinators go off, and Henry, I know you're a big fan of talking about how they all fail and flop out. And, there's this idea that because Bill Belichick has been so consistently good for so long, that just because someone is one of his coordinators, they become good. And, we talked about him when we were talking about coaching candidates. I don't want to slaughter his name, the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, Henry. You were the first person to bring him up, say he was going to be in contention. I think as a Jags fan, probably it makes sense. You've got the most appetite for him. He's in the NFL, you know about him, and he's on the offensive side of the football. But, my opinion, maybe the same as yours, Henry, is Robert Saleh is an incredible guy to, nab as your head coach right now. Really, if you think about the 49ers this season, they've been propped up by that defense, which we know Kyle Shanahan has very little input into. Not to discredit him. I'm sure he does all the right things as a head coach. We think he's great. So, nothing against Kyle Shanahan, but it's not like the same equivalent you're talking about with Andy Reid as the head coach of the Chiefs. You can't really take stuff away from Salah. Is that how you feel as well, Henry?
I think both of the names that we've mentioned so far are excellent candidates and fully deserving of being in the discussion. I think Robert Saleh is a very different hire. With Saleh, you're going to get enthusiasm and you're going to get a culture, and you're going to get an incredible level of defense for sure. If I was in the Jags sort of front office and probably a Jags fan as well, I think I'd be really hoping for an offensive coach. I mean, surely that number one pick is going to be Trevor Lawrence, and surely you want someone who's going to build the entire roster and team around that top pick. I do really like Salah, and I think if you just look to the impact that Brian Flores has had as a sort of elite motivator, defensive-minded coach, I think that's a really good template for the success that they've had with the Dolphins so far. I think Bieniemy would be a really interesting choice for the Jags. I think one of the things the Jags might struggle with is, would Bieniemy pick the Jags, even if they were to go with him? I think he will get a job this year. So I think the Jags, probably that's partly why Joe said, they've already interviewed 3 people. Often these jobs go quickly, particularly when the teams get knocked out of the playoffs. If the Chiefs were to get knocked out, I think that position would go for Bieniemy pretty quickly. Is there anyone else that you'd really like to have considered for the Jags, Joe, that you thought might be of interest, or is it just more of a type? Would you rather have offensive than defense, or anything like that?
I think in my mind, I've thought like an offensive-minded guy would probably make the most sense at this point because of the whole first overall pick thing. That said, if you believe in Jay Gruden, who I'm still kind of unsure on myself, then maybe he kind of puts his stamp on the kind of offensive side of it anyway, and you don't need to worry too much about that. I don't know. So I don't know. It's kind of open. I think I've kind of called on the idea of picking one of these college guys purely because I don't know. I mean, Urban Meyer's got obviously an amazing record in college football, but there's got to be some reason why he hasn't already made that move. And obviously he's been out of the game for a couple of years anyway. But then on the flip side of it, college players have to make that transition. What's to say that a coach can't do it too? And it has happened. It does work sometimes. So I guess it would be a risky move. And maybe not a risk you want to take when you've got the first overall pick. Maybe you want to play it a bit safer and get someone who's just got loads of years of experience in the NFL and kind of nurturing young talent in the NFL. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think Urban Meyer is a good point because he's been out of the game for a couple of years. College football's changed so much in that time span. The other big name that's been chucked out is Ryan Day, who's the current head coach of Ohio State. But like you said, there's a reason these coaches don't want to leave college. It's not necessarily the other way around, actually. It's such a cushy number. You know what you're doing. It's such a routine. You get new guys in each 4 years, and you get such longevity in programs. And if you're in Ohio State, Clemson, or Alabama at the moment, then your team's going to be competitive every season. You're going to be in the Final Four for the trophy each year. So yeah, there's not really much to, I guess, compare with the Jag system. There are 5 other vacancies at the moment. Everyone's saying the LA Chargers. We talked about Anthony Lynn. LA Chargers is another top destination. Jags, obviously, they've got the first overall pick, so it's always nice as a coach, but Chargers definitely a far more rounded team. You've also got the Jets, probably the worst spot to go into. The Lions, and that's going to be a tight leash with the Lions now. They obviously want to be in win now mode and maximize their assets. You got the Falcons, and that's going to be a tough one, trying to rebuild a team, but you'll be castrated if you didn't get rid of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and turn them into draft picks, or you'll be castrated if you did. You've also got the Texans in there too, and we've seen what a toxic environment that was. If you were looking from the coaching perspective, Henry, is there any team you'd actually want to be involved in out of those ones?
Yeah, I actually think it's not the worst crop of teams this year to be a prospective head coach. I think it's tough to look past the Texans just with Deshaun Watson. It's just you've got that franchise quarterback that everyone is searching for. It's such a sort of a level that it gives you as soon as you take the job. I just saw today that Deshaun Watson is the highest graded PFF quarterback to ever not make the playoffs. So quarterbacks never played as well as him and not made the playoffs. So I think that's a really intriguing one. Like you said, Josh, the toxic atmosphere, you're going to need to be a strong-minded individual to take that job. I think it's not that easy. Possibly my favorite pairing would be Joe Brady of the Panthers to the Falcons. He's already interviewed there. I think that'd be a really interesting matchup. And I think potentially with that number 4 pick, if you were to move on from Matt Ryan, or if you could get Justin Fields there, I think that's a real interesting situation. If you keep Matt Ryan, you could even go Jamar Chase or the new Heisman winner, Devonta Smith, and you've got an explosive offense with a coordinator who's had a lot of success with Joe Burrow and with Bridgewater this past year. That would be a really interesting one for me, I think. What are the Chargers, Josh, that you mentioned there? Is there anyone that you think you'd pair up with there, or any ideas of other people who you think might be interesting to look at?
Yeah, I don't know. The Chargers for me is a real tough one. They just feel like the Browns teams we've seen the past couple of years. You know, if you look at them individually, the players are incredible, really. Justin Herbert's had a really promising rookie season, and I think he's due for a sophomore slump, a bit of it. I think his confidence will take a knock somewhere, and we'll start to see, the Mr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde effect. That's what I'm worried about. I think you need to be a really strong character, but you also need to be an offensive guideline for him. And I don't think there's anyone who I really would categorize as that now. So I think the Chargers are going to have a rough go of it. But, I could be completely wrong. For me, I'm more just... Oh, sorry, Joe. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you tell us about Chargers. Who would you like?
No, go on. I was just going to say, I think the Chargers is one of the most attractive ones. I agree they've not got that winning culture, but that's what you as a head coach, you want to sort of bring into the team. And I think they're really talented on both sides of the ball. And you have Justin Herbert, and we've seen from this year just how much of a star he's going to be. I agree it's maybe a bit early to tell whether he's going to be whether his second season's going to be as good as his first. It would be hard for it to be that good, but I think there's a lot to like there. And head coaches probably want to be in LA as well. I think that's an aspect of it which probably is appealing to a lot of these candidates.
Yeah, and I mean, you likened Justin Herbert to Patrick Mahomes, really, Connor, didn't you? I think if you were looking at anyone's ceiling who is a rookie quarterback right now, Joe Burrow's a great player, but it feels like Justin Herbert could be Patrick Mahomes under the right circumstances. Is that what you think?
I mean, I think where I might have said that there was a bit of a likening is and I know that there's a huge difference in the way some of us talk about and perceive it. But it's more about his impact coming in. It's that confidence. It's the impact he has on the team and the potential impacts that he can have moving forward. I do think there's always that thing after the first season, isn't there? It's let's see, can it continue? And obviously they've got a huge scheme change that's just about to happen. They're about to see a whole new system, but it should be centered around him. And if he can continue to play, make those plays, adapt, put the confidence in the other players. I think my major thing around Mahomes has always been that he makes everyone better on every aspect of the ball, the play, his confidence, his aura, everything that comes about him. And every team needs a player like that to to have an impact on a team, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a quarterback. But yeah, obviously within this conversation, he has that potential, and with what we've seen from him this season.